Shabbat Shalom. So obviously my unusual kippah today is because we are on the precipice of Purim. Purim will begin next Thursday night, and I hope everybody will be able to join us together for our Megillah reading right here in the sanctuary. But there's more to discuss than just fun costumes. And thankfully, Judaism has made Purim a fairly efficient holiday. It doesn't have many restrictions on what we can or can't do. Instead, it gives us a few things we must do. We talked about them in more detail last night. The hearing of the Megillah, the giving of a gift to others, the giving of a gift to those that are poor. They are among the core elements of it. And those last two you can even double up. If you can't have, I don't have enough in your bank account to give a gift to a friend as well as giving a gift to the poor, well, you can make your gift to your friend also your gift to your poor, depending upon where your friend is in the economic scale. So we can double up. And we even did another doubling up exactly this morning. You see, we had a very special maftir. The maftir today is known as Zachor, because the first word of the maftir is Zachor. And this is one of the rare occasions where the Torah actually tells us to read the Torah. I know that may sound strange because we're reading the Torah constantly, but the Torah itself only tells us to read the Torah every 7 years. It doesn't tell us to read the entirety of the Torah all the time. That was a later addition by Ezra and the others that came back from Babylon, recognizing the utility and worth of reading Torah weekly, and then later sages put into place our now annual cycle that we use. But we did nonetheless fulfill one of the Torah's own self-referential mitzvot of reading the Torah today, because the Torah tells us to remember Amalek, and so we read the passage telling us to remember Amalek. The Torah tells us not to forget Amalek, and so we read the same exact passage, which also tells us not to forget Amalek. 2 for 1, that's a bargain by mitzvah standards. But there is a third mitzvah for Amalek. But before we get to that one, we have to figure out who the Amalekites were and why we are commanded to remember them and not forgive them. Anybody got the short version, the Cliff Notes version, if you will, of the Amalekite story? Yes, tell me about the Amalekites, Jocelyn. He was the son of Esau, and right. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, hold on. We'll come up to that part of it in just a second, but let's get the original part of their involvement with our people. We are leaving Egypt, and as we are leaving, we are, of course, a brand new people, first time back into freedom in quite a few generations, and it is a schlep, to put it mildly, between Egypt and going to the land of Israel. And along the path, shortly after we had left Egypt itself, the Amalekites attacked. Now, they attacked us not only while we were weary, but they attacked the weariest of the weary. That is to say, they deliberately targeted the back of the caravan, if you will. They attacked the people that were the stragglers, who were the young, the old, the infirm, the people who were not able to keep up with the main pace. And they targeted them specifically for murder. This was not really a looting expedition. Things that were valuable and that were being heavy were being carried by people who were stronger. This was just a chance to murder. And as such, the Amalekites established themselves and repeated this throughout other subsequent generations as their MO, that they were a group who believed in the joy of murder, in the joy of inflicting pain upon other people and seemed to revel in it in any opportunity they could find. They were not only our enemies, they were the enemies of other nations all around as well. So, the third mitzvah of the Amalekite trilogy, remember we have remember them, don't forget them, and blot out their name. Well, blot out their name means what exactly? Well, the usual definition, and the one that many people are led to believe was the intended definition by the Haftarah that was read today, thank you, Mark, is to wipe them out from stem to stern. That is to say, what we would call in the modern vernacular, genocide. That we should murder every last single one of them, down to the root, destroy the entire people in their entirety. Now, I'm willing to wager that many of us feel uncomfortable with the concept of God ordaining a genocide against another nation. Well, you might be uncomfortable that God said don't eat pork. Our discomfort doesn't measure the validity of a commandment. And if God says to wipe something out, well, then we should be busy wiping it out, right? Probably still a little uncomfortable. Well, let me help you a little bit with that. Because if we were going to take the idea that the commandment from the Torah as being implemented by Shaul, faultily, was to actually commit a complete extermination, then we run up against a couple of problems. One, we know of at least one survivor of the Amalekites that was still kicking almost 1,000 years later. His name was Haman. Right? Haman the Agagite was descended from King Agag, who was the main character at the end of our Haftarah, and as such was an Amalekite. So if we were supposed to be wiping them out, well, we did a pretty bad job of that, because he, at least, his family was still around in the time of the Persian Empire. Now, you could argue, well, yes, some of them slipped through our fingers, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have been killing them if only we had had the chance to kill them. Well, if I want to throw a counter to that, I need point no further than that wonderfully liberal document known as the Talmud. You see, the Talmud has a remarkable ability to give us insights that befuddle modern people who think only in terms of black and white. The Talmud doesn't deal in such trivialities. The Talmud tells us that there are a number of villains throughout our history. We have Nebuchadnezzar, who was the Babylonian emperor that destroyed the first temple. We have Sennacherib, who was the Assyrian emperor that destroyed the northern 10 tribes. We have Haman, who is the villain of the Purim story and is a descendant of the Amalekites. And yet, for each and every one of those characters, the rabbi said they had descendants who were rabbis. That there were descendants of Nebuchadnezzar who taught Torah in Jerusalem. That there were descendants of Sennacherib who taught Torah in Jerusalem. And there were descendants of Haman who taught Torah in specifically Bnei Barak. How do we square this circle? If we are supposed to exterminate them, at least the Amalekites, of which Haman was one, then how are we making them rabbis? How are we allowing them to be teaching Torah? Clearly, they were slated for destruction, and yet, what? We're derelict in our duties? The rabbis are derelict in their duties? The rabbis know the halakha better than anyone, and yet they're making somebody supposedly that they're meant to exterminate into another rabbi? The extermination order for Amalek was not meant as an extermination for each and every genetic descendant of the Amalekites. It was meant as a shattering of their culture. To wipe them out meant that they could no longer function as Amalek. That Amalek as a concept, as a cohesive nation doing what Amalek was doing, would no longer be tenable, and that was achieved. There is no Amalekite nation out there today. The Amalekite culture is not considered to be a dominant or successful culture. the Amalekites are gone. We actually completed that task. But that doesn't mean that the job is over. First of all, we have to recognize that those that were descended from Amalek, that are not part of Amalek, that is to say, those who may have had ancestry among the Amalekites, but who themselves do not embrace the Amalekite philosophy, who do not live according to Amalekite ideals, they are welcome among our people. They are welcome to become rabbis, should they learn and be able to teach the people in such a way. But those who are not genetic Amalekites, but nonetheless embrace the philosophy of Amalek in any different era, well, we are still their enemies. We are still their foes. When we have the holiday of Purim, what is one of the most beloved customs of all of our children, what to keep their attention throughout the reading of the Megillah, at least from chapter 3 onwards, booing for Haman. I mean, this is actually a problem in our classrooms where when we try to tell the story of Purim and you try to mention Haman, all of the kids in the room will immediately go, boo! And it's like, look, I'm trying to give you a lesson right now. We're not doing the Megillah reading. I need to get the name out without being booed and interrupted every few seconds. But they are trained. You hear the name Haman, you boo. Haman, boo. It is like Pavlovian level response. And they've got half of the idea right, which is that there needs to be an immediate response to the name of Haman. The part that they get wrong is why. Because we're not actually blotting out Haman's name by booing for Haman. Because if we booed while Haman's name was being recited, the reader would have to repeat it. Because every word of the Megillah must be heard. We can't skip words, and we can't drown them out to the point where they're not heard by the community. So when you say the name Haman, you boo after the name and prior to the continuation of the reading. It is not actually blotting out his name. It is blotting out what he stands for. It is conditioning within us a reaction, a sensitivity, an immediate allergic response to when we encounter a Haman-like substance. That when we see hate, we say, boo! When we see sexism, we say boo! When we see people that are mean, when they are chauvinist, when they are selfish, when they are full of wrath, when they harm others in order to inflict cruelty as the point, we say no. That is what it is trying to train us to do. That is our ongoing fight with the Amalekites. It has nothing to do with a genetic legacy. It has nothing to do with tracing family trees back 3,000 years to find whom we should go kill. Although, if you wanted to make a cool serial killer episode of someone trying to hunt down Amalekite descendants, talk to me and we can get a copyright going on that. But that's not what Torah tells us to do. Torah is not telling us you only had to worry about the Amalekites and now the job is done, you can relax. It said you had to worry about the Amalekites as a cohesive threat in their day, and you did that. You took care of them. Now you have to worry about Amalekite lookalikes. You have to look out for others who continue to embrace that ideology, that philosophy, whether it be on a small scale, whether it be that petty jerk at the office who continues to belittle the women on the staff. You need to stand up and say, no, I've had enough of your chauvinism. That's not acceptable in this office. Whether it's the neighbor who is always complaining to you about those people moving into our neighborhood and pushing down the property prices because you know what they're like. You don't just walk away. You say, boo. The same way that you would shake a grogger at Haman, you shake your fist at them. Say, how dare you? How dare you treat other human beings that way? When you see somebody deliberately turn the screws on someone else just to watch them squirm, you say no. Being an adherent of Torah means being involved in the struggle against this Amalekite behavior at all time. We are not concerned with your genetics, we are concerned with your ethics. And if your ethics smack of the Amalekites, even if it's occasionally, not that you are a full-blown, constant Amalekite and actually have statues of their gods in your house, but just occasionally you dip your toe in the hateful, resentful, selfish, cruel, and bitter world of Amalekite thinking. When that happens, I'm going to call you out. When that happens, I'm going to boo you with as much passion as I boo Haman. Not with as much of a smile, because I don't know quite how this story is going to end. But that doesn't mean I stop. When God gave us these commandments, it was not just to remember something that happened 3,000 years ago. It was so what happened 3,000 years ago wouldn't happen again. And we as a people have a pretty good track record of standing up, but it could be better. And that means that we are going to have that reminder, even as we raise a glass on Purim, even as we shake our gruggers, and even as we boo Haman, to recognize that the meaning of this holiday extends beyond the borders of one day. And it is not wrapped up in some genetic genocide, as some people continue to believe, but is instead wrapped up in what is ultimately a statement of moral absolutism. Yes, there are many different ways to serve God, but there are some ways that are off limits. And we're going to tell you when we see it. Shabbat Shalom.